Rain slammed against the windows as if someone was trying to break into my tiny apartment. Each drop, heavy, relentless, cold enough to make the Chicago sky turn darker and darker. Wind whipped around the high-rise buildings, hurling sheets of water sideways across the old window frame of my worn-out studio. I stood in the bathroom, my hands trembling so violently I nearly dropped the thing lying in my palm. 2 lines. Again. For the 5th time. I held my breath as tears burned down my cheeks, mixing with the thick, musty smell that always clung to this place. It felt like the whole world was shrinking into one sound, my heartbeat pounding out of rhythm, too loud, too frantic. No. No way. I whispered, clutching the pregnancy test so tightly my knuckles turned white. But the truth lay there anyway, cold, merciless, unchanging. I, Hannah Foster, 24. A waitress at an old diner on West Adams Avenue was carrying a child, fathered by the man who vanished from my life without a single explanation. Mason. His name twisted something sharp inside my chest. Love turned to betrayal in just one night. It had been 7 weeks since he disappeared with every penny I had scraped together over 3 grueling years. Rent money savings, even my debit card, he took everything as if I had never mattered at all. Apartment 28B, the place I was standing in now, was drowning in final notice and eviction warning slips plastered all over the door. I could be kicked out any day. I set the test down, took a long, shaky breath, and reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over my contacts, and my throat thickened with a familiar bruising ache. If Mason wouldn't face me, he would have to hear me. At least once. I opened the message window and typed slowly under the dim yellow light. Rain pounded harder against the windows, each hit echoing through the words I forced myself to write. You need to know this. I'm pregnant. And it's yours. Then I added one last line, a blade of truth I wanted him to feel. You don't get to run away. I hit send. The instant my finger touched the screen, my heart plummeted. I slid down the wall, sitting on the freezing tile floor, burying my face in my hands. The apartment felt smaller and smaller, pressing in on me from every direction. Whatever. At least it's sent now. But 10 seconds later, my phone vibrated. Unknown number calling. I jolted so hard I dropped the phone. My pulse hammered as I scrambled to pick it up. Mason, I whispered. Silence. 1 second. 2. Then a man's voice came through, deep, cold, and completely unfamiliar. It seems you texted the wrong person. My breath caught my throat, going painfully dry. This wasn't Mason. This wasn't anyone I knew. The voice was too calm. But beneath that calmness was something that made every hair on my body stand on end. An invisible authority. A dangerous weight I couldn't name. Before I could respond, the voice continued, smooth but sharp like a blade sliding across silk. But I do have one question. Hannah Foster, what did that man do to you? My whole body jerked upright, heart pounding violently. How do you know my name? You signed the utility payment form 3 days ago. The security system at Sawyer Court isn't as private as you think. My breath stopped. He knew where I lived. He knew my name. He was watching me. No, that was impossible. I hung up immediately. The phone hit the floor with a dry thud that echoed through the empty room. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, my heart threatening to tear out of my chest. Who just spoke to me? I hurriedly opened the message I had sent and froze. There it was. One tiny mistake, 1 digit, wrong. A single misplaced number had delivered my life into the hands of a stranger. 3 knocks hit the door. Knock, knock, knock. I stopped breathing. No one came to see me. No one even knew I was home. No one cared enough to show up at my door. My throat tightened. I stepped toward the door and looked through the peephole. And the blood in my veins turned to ice. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long black coat. His head tilted slightly as if listening to the sound of my breath from inside the room. He didn't look like anyone in the building. Not a neighbor, not maintenance, not anyone I had ever seen. His presence filled the dim hallway with something heavy, something that made even the air hold still. I instinctively backed away, but then his eyes lifted straight toward the peephole. He saw me. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. Who you looking for?" A beat of silence. Then his voice came low enough to vibrate in my bones. "I'm looking for someone who sent me a very intriguing message." My lungs froze. He lifted his face and his steel blue eyes cut through the darkness. "My name is Samuel Harrison." That name I had heard it somewhere before. In hushed conversations at the diner, in whispers that slipped between customers, like secrets never meant to be spoken aloud. A name people lowered their heads for. A name belonging to a world the law couldn't touch. I don't know you," I stammered. "Please leave." That message, it was a mistake. Samuel placed one hand on the doorframe and leaned in close enough for me to hear every word as it fell from his lips. "Mistake or not, that Mason guy hurt you badly enough that you reached out to a stranger in the middle of a storm." I trembled. He knew. He read everything from a single text. I was about to shut the door when he spoke again, one final sentence that sliced straight through my fragile defenses. "If you want me to leave, Hannah, I can. But before I go, answer me one thing." My fingers tightened on the doorknob. "Wait, what thing?" His gaze locked onto mine so deep and cutting, it felt like he saw straight through me. "The child you're carrying. Does it need a father?" I went numb. The room spun. The storm outside fell silent in my ears. No one ever had asked me that. No one had cared. No one had seen me. And in those eyes sharp like a blade yet holding something I couldn't name, I felt myself standing at the edge of a precipice. One more step, and I would fall into a world completely different from mine. A world that belonged to him. If you want to continue following the mysterious magnetic pull between Hannah and Samuel, born from one wrong digit, and a stormy night stay with the story, the real twists are only beginning. The door remained slightly ajar, separating me from the man standing in the dim hallway outside. The air carried the cold scent of rain, the metallic tang of rusted door frames, and something else, something dangerous slithering through each breath I took. My hand rested on the doorknob, but my palm was icy. Samuel Harrison tilted his head, the yellow hallway light casting sharp contours across his chiseled face, drawing shadows and highlights that made him look both unreal and unsettlingly present. In the heavy silence broken only by the soft ticking of rain against my window, he stood without rushing, without forcing anything. Yet his presence alone was enough to suffocate me. "I don't need anyone interfering in my life," I whispered, my voice trembling so clearly I could hear the weakness in it myself. Samuel leaned lightly against the doorframe, his steel blue eyes glinting beneath the shadows. "Not interfering," he replied slowly, each word precisely measured. "But I see you standing at the edge of a cliff." I frowned, trying to swallow the fragility rising inside me. "I'm none of your concern." He let out a quiet laugh, soft but cold, like wind brushing across a frozen lake. "I don't need to be your concern. To see you're about to fall." I began closing the door when he spoke again, this time lower, more dangerous. "You haven't eaten, have you?" My heartbeat thudded painfully. His eyes flicked to my thin sweater, then to the swollen corners of my eyes, raw from sleepless nights. "You haven't slept properly for at least 3 days. Your eyes are red, your hands are shaking, your breathing is short." I swallowed hard. Was he analyzing me? "You don't know anything about me," I snapped. Samuel angled his head slightly. "On the contrary, I know that if you collapse in this apartment, no one will notice for days. I heard your footsteps falter just minutes ago, and I know you're 7 weeks pregnant." My breath hitched, chest tightening. "Stop talking." Samuel fell silent. Outside, the rain poured harder streams of water racing down the window pane. A faint blue glow from an old neon sign outside flashed through the room, casting his shadow on the wall, long imposing like a figure that didn't belong to this world. I belonged to the lowest rung of Chicago, the cracked brick level, the unseen, unheard level. And he stepped into my life as if he had known that one day I would open that door. "You should let me in," he said, not as a command, but like a warning of something approaching. I opened the door a little wider. Why, his eyes dipped to my stomach for barely a second, but long enough to make my heartbeat falter. "For the baby." I didn't remember stepping back. But when I lifted my gaze, Samuel had already entered my apartment, moving with a calm familiarity as though he had walked through this darkness before. Rain dripped from his long coat onto the old tiles, with a soft sound like the apartment itself was sighing beneath his presence. He stood in the tiny space where the kitchen, living room, and bedroom melted into one. His eyes swept across the room just once, and somehow that single glance made every flaw throb under the dim light, the peeling paint, the broken lamp, the pile of overdue bills stacked like a collapsing tower. He didn't criticize, didn't comment, just observed. Silently. Too silently. "I don't want any trouble," I said. Samuel turned to me, his voice quieter but heavier. "We already have trouble, Hannah. And not from me." I froze. He pulled a slightly crumpled paper from his coat and placed it on the small table beside the sink. "I found this taped to your door. The eviction notice. I had hidden it under the front mat. He had seen it." "You have no right," I began. "I don't need a right," Samuel said, his voice low but impossibly gentle. "Do you think I came here out of curiosity?" I said nothing. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable, like a storm building quietly behind steel clouds. "You sent the message by mistake, Hannah. But the content of it was not a mistake. Each word landed exactly where I was weakest." I turned away, hiding my trembling hands behind my back. "I don't need your pity. This isn't pity." His voice came from behind me so close I stopped breathing. "I've met many people," he said. "The ones who pretend to be strong, the ones who complain, the ones who beg me to protect them. But you're terrible at lying, and yet you endure more than most." His words stunned me enough to make me turn around. In the dim light, his features sharpened the deep eyes, the hard jawline. But his voice held a strange softness, the kind that existed only in the most dangerous places. "I'm not here to corner you," Samuel said. "I'm here because I saw something you're trying very hard to hide." I frowned. "What?" He held my gaze so long that the sound of rain tapping the window began to sync with my heartbeat. Fear. I closed my eyes for a moment, just 1 second, but in that second, the warmth inside my chest seemed to collapse into cold air. Samuel stood barely a step away. No touching, no forcing, no threats. But every word he spoke slipped right into the cracks inside me. "I'm not afraid," I protested automatically. "You're trembling." I glanced down, my fingers were curled so tightly they were turning pale. His words weren't commands. They were observations, like he was looking straight into a shadow I had tried to bury. I stepped aside, trying to build any distance between us. "What do you want?" I asked. "Why keep saying things I don't need to hear?" His eyes deepened, as if he were seeing through every barrier I tried to pull up. "I want to know what Mason did to you that left you carrying everything alone." Mason's name ripped through me like an old wound tearing open again. I whispered, "It's none of your business." Samuel leaned slightly closer, just enough that I felt the faint warmth of his breath. "But it concerns the baby." For the first time that night, his voice lost its coldness, becoming something raw, painfully real. I stepped back. He didn't follow, but his presence still pressed around me like an invisible boundary I couldn't escape. "I don't need your help," I insisted. Samuel lifted a brow. "What did you eat today?" Silence. His expression tightened just slightly. "Since this morning," he said quietly, "your heart rate has been too fast. That's not only anxiety. You don't know anything about me." Then he said something so soft, so unexpected, every drop of blood in my veins froze. "I've seen a pregnant woman fall into the same situation you're in now." I looked up sharply. For a moment, his gaze drifted far away, as if looking into a wound time couldn't mend. I let her slip through my fingers. His voice was low and heavy, half confession, half warning. "I won't let that happen again." I stood still. My breath slowed without me realizing. He wasn't begging, wasn't pitying me, wasn't threatening. He was telling the truth, and that truth didn't belong to me. It belonged to his past. And that was more dangerous than anything else. "I can help you," Samuel said. "Food. A safe place to sleep. A doctor. All you have to do is say yes." I bowed my head slightly, hiding the sudden sting behind my eyes. Why, I asked for the third time. Why do you care? Samuel looked at me as if the question was almost too simple. Because you texted the wrong number, he said slowly. And sometimes fate begins with the smallest mistake. A cold wind slipped through the door crack. Rain still poured relentlessly outside. And I, standing there, felt a terrifying realization bloom inside me. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I was afraid of what was beginning within myself. And when Samuel spoke next, my life shifted completely. Hannah, come with me. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation, a dangerous one. A door opening into a world I had never dared to step into. My hand tightened around the doorknob. I took a slow breath, my heart filled with unspoken fears, and I knew if I followed him, I would never go back. I stood in the dark apartment staring at Samuel Harrison as if he were a doorway, one that could lead in two opposite directions. One step away from the life I knew, or one step into a dangerous world I wasn't sure I was strong enough to survive. Outside, the rain hammered against the metal roof, each strike urging me forward. Samuel waited, not pushing, not urging, but his gaze was powerful enough to knock my heartbeat off rhythm. I bent down and picked up my thin coat from the chair. My fingers brushed the cold fabric, and my heart stumbled. At that exact moment, Samuel shifted a little to the side, widening the space between him and the door, creating a path. Not pulling, not demanding, just opening a way. I stepped through, and the wooden door behind us closed with a soft sound, so soft, yet it felt like the sound of an entire chapter of my life being sealed shut. Samuel led me down the narrow, dim stairwell of Sawyer Court. Water dripped from the ceiling. The air smelled of damp rust, familiar scents that suddenly felt foreign now that I wasn't walking alone. On the third step, I stumbled. Before I could catch myself, a strong hand wrapped around my forearm, steadying me. His touch was warm, firm, yet so gentle it felt like he was afraid of hurting me. Slowly, Samuel murmured, his voice deep, threaded with a flicker of tension he didn't manage to hide. I pulled my hand back quickly, but the warmth he left behind spread up my arm like an imprint I couldn't shake off. "Thank you," I whispered. He didn't reply, but something softened in his eyes, a small shift so subtle I wouldn't have noticed if we hadn't been so close. Outside, a sleek black SUV waited under a street lamp. Two men stood beside it. One held a large umbrella. The other opened the car door the moment Samuel appeared. Both silent, expressionless. Samuel didn't look at them. Instead, he placed a light hand against the small of my back, guiding me toward the rear seat. The gesture made my breath catch. Not forceful, not controlling, but attentive. So attentive it felt like he registered every uncertain step I took. When I settled into the seat, he leaned in slightly and closed the door with surprising care, as if I were something fragile. And maybe to him I was. The SUV pulled away, leaving behind the crumbling street I had called home. I watched the blurred streetlights on the rain-smeared window. With every passing block, I felt myself drifting farther from the bleak reality I knew, and deeper into something I had never planned for. Samuel sat beside me, one hand resting on his knee, his thumb brushing a simple black ring on his left hand. I caught his gaze in the rearview mirror. He hadn't looked away from me once. I turned my face aside. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To a doctor," he replied. "You need a checkup." I tightened my hands in my lap. I didn't agree to anything long-term. "I know. I don't want to be controlled." "I know that too. I'm not used to anyone making decisions for me." Samuel turned his head slightly, his eyes sharp, yet not cold. "Hannah, you have the right to refuse anything, but the baby doesn't." The words left me speechless. For the first time, someone had looked at my situation and placed the child first. The SUV stopped in the underground garage of a tall building near the Chicago River. When the door opened, cold lake wind swept in. Samuel stepped out first, then extended his hand toward me. I stared at it. A strong hand, yet with no pressure, no expectation. Just a silent choice. I placed my hand in his. Warmth seeped through, instantly tightening something deep in my chest. He guided me to a private elevator. When the doors shut, cutting off the storm outside, we were wrapped in a soft, quiet light. "Is this your building?" I asked. No, he said. Someplace quieter. The elevator stopped at the 40th floor. As the doors slid open, I froze. A clinic. But not the kind I knew. This one was bright, calm, immaculate, like a luxury hotel disguised as a medical facility. A woman in a white coat stood waiting. She bowed slightly to Samuel. Good evening, Mr. Harrison? He nodded. Dr. Morales, this is Hannah Foster. I gave a small, uncertain nod. The doctor smiled kindly, though her eyes quickly assessed my condition with professional precision. Would you come in with me, Hannah? I hesitated and looked at Samuel. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, he said softly. The reassurance landed exactly where I needed it most, like being offered a choice rather than being pushed into one. I nodded. Dr. Morales guided me into a warm, softly lit room. It didn't smell like bleach or antiseptic. Instead, it smelled faintly of lavender. When I lay down, my hand instinctively covered my stomach. The doctor placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. No need to worry, it's just a simple check. I tried to breathe steadily. A moment later, she positioned the probe on my abdomen. The screen beside me flickered on. I looked, and my heart stopped. A tiny dot. So small, but moving. Dr. Morales smiled warmly. That's the heartbeat. Strong and steady. My hand covered my mouth as tears spilled before I could stop them. The fear, the shame, the panic of the past weeks, all of it melted the moment I saw that flickering rhythm of life. In that moment, I forgot Samuel was standing just a few steps behind me. Until he spoke softly, Hannah. I turned my head. He was watching me, and his expression was different. Not cold, not distant. Something had cracked open inside him. I wiped my tears quickly. Sorry. Samuel took a single step closer. Don't apologize for that. I let out a shaky laugh. I didn't expect to feel this way when I saw its heartbeat. He was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, You don't have to be ready. I'll be ready for both of you. My breath caught. Not because the words were grand, but because there was nothing false in his eyes when he said them. After the exam, the doctor handed me vitamins and a list of instructions. I slipped them into my bag, just as Samuel stepped closer, his fingers brushing my arm, not gripping, just guiding. The contact made every muscle in my body tense in a way I couldn't explain. Inside the elevator, with just the two of us again, I could hear both our breaths in the quietness. Hannah, he said, his voice deep but softened, as if he chose each word carefully. You're not going back to that apartment. I tensed. Samuel, I told you I know. He tilted his head slightly, studying my reaction before continuing. But it's not safe for you anymore. I blinked. Who said anything about danger? Mason disappeared too cleanly. Someone helped him. And I don't know if they'll come back looking for what he left behind. What he left behind. The baby. My arms wrapped protectively around my stomach before I even realized. Samuel saw the movement, and something dark flickered through his eyes, a dangerous kind of anger he swallowed down. I won't let anything happen to you, he said. I looked at him fully without looking away. Because of the baby. Without hesitation, he answered. Because of you. A sharp, startling ache tightened in my chest, and I had to turn away so he wouldn't see my eyes water again. I didn't know what Samuel Harrison wanted. Didn't know why he stepped into my life on a stormy night. But I knew this. When the elevator doors opened onto the top floor, where the wind carried the chill of the open sky, I was stepping into a realm that belonged entirely to him. And something deep inside whispered that my life would never be the same again. The elevator doors opened into a vast space bathed in soft moonlike light. I held my breath as I stepped out after Samuel. What stretched before me was a world completely opposite from the crumbling life I came from. But it wasn't the luxury that made my feet falter. It was the contrast. Sharp, clean architectural lines. Every piece of expensive furniture placed with precision, as if planned out on blueprints. A penthouse easily 10 times the size of my old apartment. Yet it didn't feel lived in. No spices on the kitchen shelf. No family photos, no stray personal belongings, no remnants of normal life. Only silence, a silence polished by wealth and power. Samuel stood beside me quietly observing my reaction. He didn't say anything at first. He simply pulled a key from his coat and set it on the marble counter near the entrance. "This place is too big," I murmured, my voice smaller than I expected. "Big enough that you won't feel trapped," Samuel replied, then glanced at me, "Even though you still think you are." Heat flooded my cheeks. I was never good at hiding my thoughts, and he read me like an open book. Samuel walked a few steps into the living room and turned back to me. "Come with me. There's something I want you to see first." I hesitated but followed him. He led me to a massive glass wall that wrapped around the corner of the room. Below, Chicago glowed streets branching like golden veins across the night. In the distance, the highway curved like a ribbon of light, and the Chicago River shimmered gently under the city's reflections. Samuel stood behind me, not touching standing far enough to respect my space, but close enough that I could feel the faint warmth of his breath. "Why this place?" I asked softly. "I needed somewhere safe for you before I can figure out how Mason vanished." His voice was low, slow, and I don't believe in coincidences. I turned to him. "What do you mean, that mistyped text?" Samuel raised a brow. "I don't think it was an accident." My heart jolted. "But it was an accident. I really did send it to the wrong number." "I know." He cut me off gently, not sharply. "But mistakes are sometimes how fate pushes two people into a situation they can't step back from." His calmness made my chest feel tight in a strange, overwhelming way. I tore my gaze from his and looked back at the sweeping city view. "Samuel, I don't know anyone like you." "Good," he said. "I don't know anyone like you either." The simple line struck deeper than I wanted to admit. Samuel guided me to a room. When he opened the door, I had to stifle a gasp behind my hand. It wasn't lavish like the living room, not cold or empty. It was warm, soft lighting, gentle beige bedding, a lavender sprig near the window, a quiet room filled with small comforts I hadn't felt in years. "Hannah," Samuel said, standing slightly to the side. As he watched my reaction, "I prepared this room so you wouldn't feel lost." I turned to him slowly. "When did you prepare this?" "Before I came to your apartment." I froze. "You were sure I'd come with you?" Samuel held my gaze long enough to make me look away. "No, I wasn't sure." A pause. "But I knew you didn't have any other choice that wouldn't harm you." The truth of it caught in my throat. He saw the fragile parts of me with unnerving clarity. Yet he didn't sound triumphant or smug, just honest. I crossed my arms and leaned against the bed frame. "Did you bring me here out of pity?" "No." Samuel stepped closer and stopped 2 steps away. "I brought you here because you needed protection." I let out a small, shaky laugh, but it came out more like a weak gasp. "My entire fortune is one chipped mug and a few diner uniforms. I'm not worth protecting." Samuel studied me long, so long it felt like he could see straight through me. "Your worth isn't in what you own," he said quietly. "It's in what you're fighting through." My throat tightened. This man was dangerous not only because of his power, but because he saw truths I thought I had buried. When I finished putting away the few belongings I brought, Samuel stood outside the door waiting. It seemed until I had steadied myself. "All right," he said. "There are a few things you need to know." I straightened. Instead of sounding tense, Samuel crossed his arms loosely, speaking with a calmness that felt deliberate. "First, you're not a prisoner here. You can move freely in the building and call anyone from security if you need help." I bit my lip. "And if I want to leave the building?" Samuel's eyes sharpened, not unkindly, but decisively. "In that case," he said, "we'll discuss it once I confirm you're not being followed." A chill slid down my spine. Not because he was controlling, because he was serious. Serious about danger, not dominance. "Second," he continued, "Dr. Morales will come every week. I want to make sure you and the baby are stable." I instinctively placed a hand over my stomach. "You don't have to do all that." Samuel shook his head. "I do what's necessary." "For the baby," I whispered. He didn't answer right away. He stepped a little closer, close enough that I felt him before I heard him. "For you," he said. My heart skipped so visibly I had to turn away before he saw the flush in my eyes. Just when I thought the conversation was ending, Samuel spoke again. "Hannah, yes, you can hate me for bringing you here." He met my eyes directly without flinching. "I can accept that." I frowned. "And what can't you accept?" A faint curve tugged at the corner of his lips. Not a smile exactly, but something like a gentle warning. "I can't accept you suffering alone." I froze. No one had ever said anything like that to me. No one had ever seen my loneliness so clearly. No one had touched the sadness I hid so carefully with such gentleness. I couldn't speak. Not a single word. Samuel waited a moment, then nodded softly. "The door will remain open. If you need anything, just call my name." He turned and walked down the hallway toward the silent expanse of the penthouse. As his tall figure disappeared, I realized something unexpected. The silence in this apartment no longer felt threatening. It simply made my heart beat louder, a heartbeat that no longer belonged entirely to me. The first morning in Samuel Harrison's penthouse began with a soft, silk-like light falling through the thin curtains. I opened my eyes, needing several beats to remember where I was and why I was here. A faint lavender scent lingered in the air. The blanket was warm in a way that felt almost indulgent. The room was too quiet, almost devoid of life, except for the wind sliding past the thick glass. And for a brief moment, I forgot that Chicago outside was still full of storms. I climbed out of bed, my hand instinctively resting on my stomach. There was a heartbeat. No longer only mine. I moved slowly into the hallway. Light spilling from the living room cast a silhouette against the floor. Someone standing near the large glass window. Samuel. He stood with his back to me, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a phone to his ear. The morning glow illuminated the crisp white of his shirt, outlining the shape of his shoulders. Firm, controlled, unmistakably powerful. His voice was low and sharp. "I want every camera around Sawyer Court pulled within 2 hours. And Carter, no one is to know we're investigating." I froze. Sawyer Court. The building I lived in? The place I left behind in a single night. Samuel's voice grew colder than I'd ever heard it. If anyone went near that apartment after she left. "I want to know." "No, Carter, don't assume. I want facts, not speculation." I had never heard him speak so much in one call. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but each word falling from Samuel's mouth sent a chill down my spine. There was something he wasn't telling me. A shadow moved in the glass reflection. Samuel turned. His eyes found me instantly. He ended the call. No farewell. No instruction, just one fluid, decisive motion. "You're up early." His voice was low, but not as cold as moments before. "I heard you were on the phone." "Work." He stepped toward me, but kept a respectful distance. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded softly. I don't remember the last time I slept peacefully. Samuel didn't smile or show satisfaction. He simply watched me for a long moment, as if reading every emotion in my face. "Dr. Morales will be here at 10. You should eat first." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could swallow anything. He walked ahead of me, his footsteps steady and calm on the wooden floor. I followed. The dining table had already been prepared. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit, warm ginger tea. I glanced around the spotless kitchen. It looked unused, like something out of a catalog. Perhaps it genuinely had never been used. Samuel didn't seem like the type to cook. Or maybe he simply didn't bother with things like that. He sat across from me. He didn't eat, just sipped black coffee. His sharp gaze seemed to track every movement I made, not controlling, but protective. "Do you always wake up this early?" I asked, breaking the silence. "I'm usually up before dawn." "Because of work. Because I don't sleep long." A faint shadow crossed his eyes. "Or let myself sleep long." "Let yourself," I repeated. Samuel set his cup down. He held my gaze for a long time before answering. "When someone loses something important while they're asleep, they don't dare sleep deeply anymore." I tightened my grip on my cup. There was something intimate in his words, something from a part of him few had ever been allowed to see. I wanted to ask more, but Samuel reached for the iPad beside him and slid it toward me. There are some things you need to look over. I hesitated before unlocking it. A neatly organized list appeared: medical checkups, weekly nutrition plans, prenatal yoga schedules, recommended doctors, and lastly a note that made my breath catch. Safety itinerary. I looked up. What is this? An itinerary to ensure every place you go is pre-checked. Why would I need that? I tried to keep my voice calm. Samuel, I'm not important enough to warrant that level of protection. He tilted his head slightly. Hannah, last night when I took you away, a car was parked at the end of Sawyer Court. 3 a.m, engine still running. The driver kept watching the entrance. My blood froze. Maybe he was waiting for someone. If so, Samuel replied calmly. Their friend was oddly patient. He rested one arm on the table. That car appeared 3 times last week. My breath stuttered. How do you know? His eyes sharpened. Because I monitored your building the moment I received your message. The words punched the air out of me, not in fear, but something closer to being exposed. You monitored me. I monitored Mason. His voice dropped into something colder, heavier, and everything connected to him. Not because of me, but also partly because of me. Samuel's gaze held mine as if saying what he couldn't articulate. Mason crossed too many lines, he said, and the people he owes may go after anyone tied to him. You think I'm in danger? I don't think. He placed his hand on the table close to mine. I know. The certainty made the air around me dense, suffocating. I pushed my chair back. I can't live like that. I can't be trapped and guarded like a prisoner. Samuel rose the moment I did. He didn't touch me, but he placed his hand on the back of the chair beside us, bringing us close enough that his breath brushed my skin. Hannah, he said, voice so low it was almost a whisper. You're pregnant. You can't face the people I've faced. I don't need you to save me. Samuel leaned slightly forward. His eyes weren't cold now. They were darker, heavier, almost wounded. I'm not saving you, he said quietly. I'm stopping you from getting hurt. I froze. You can't stop everything from reaching me. Samuel looked straight into my eyes so deeply I felt swallowed by the intensity. Not everything. But what I can stop, I will. A promise quiet as a sigh, heavy as a vow. And it tightened something in my chest I didn't want to acknowledge. Dr. Morales arrived while the room was still filled with tension. She checked my vitals, asked a few questions, then told me to avoid stress. Samuel stood a little distance away, arms crossed, silently watching, but never interfering. When she left, I turned to him. I need time, I said firmly, though my voice was soft. Samuel nodded. I'm here. I didn't say I needed you, I added. I know. His tone didn't change. But you're not alone. I turned away so he wouldn't see my eyes grow warm. In the afternoon, sunlight dipped across the windows. I stood near the bedroom balcony, the distant smell of lake water drifting in through a faint draft. I was trying to breathe evenly when I saw it. A black car parked in the empty lot across the street. Motionless. Unmoving. I held my breath. Cold prickled down my spine. It looked exactly as Samuel had described. I stepped back, my heart constricting. At that moment, the bedroom door opened. Samuel stood there. He didn't say, sorry for coming in. He didn't ask, is everything all right? He just looked at me, and for the first time I saw something raw in his eyes. Real concern. What is it? I swallowed. There's a car out there. Samuel stepped beside me and looked down. A few seconds of silence. Then his jaw tightened. His eyes sharpened like a blade being drawn. Get inside, he said, his voice low, lethal, cold enough to freeze the room. I barely moved before he pulled the curtains shut. Samuel, do you know who they are? He turned to me, and the words he spoke made me realize the real storm was only just beginning. They're not mine, and that's the problem. Samuel pulled the curtains closed with more force than usual. Not violent, but enough for me to understand one thing clearly. He was tense, wound tight like a drawn bowstring. In the dim light of the room, his usual composed calm was gone. What replaced it was sharp alertness, cold-focused, and something I had never seen so clearly until now. "Samuel," I whispered. He turned his jaw tight, his eyes no longer hiding the danger rising from somewhere deep within him. "I need you away from the window. Right now." I backed up until my spine pressed against the wall. My throat felt painfully dry. "Do you know who they are?" Samuel didn't answer immediately. He stepped close enough that he stood between me and the faint light filtering in from the window, as if he intended to shield me with his own body. "I don't recognize the license plate." His voice dropped dangerously calm. "And that is not normal." I frowned. "What do you mean if they were mine, I'd know?" His eyes darkened depth layered beneath steel. "If they were my enemies, I'd still know." A heavy silence fell between us. Then who was left? He finally spoke one more sentence, just one enough to make my heart clench. "Hannah, is there anyone besides Mason who knows you're pregnant?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. No one. I didn't tell anyone. Samuel watched me for a long time, as if he wasn't just hearing my answer, but reading every flicker beneath my skin. Eventually, he nodded, though tension still flickered sharply in his eyes. "Good, but we can't stay here long." The way he said it sent a chill traveling down my spine. "You're saying they're following me?" Samuel closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them again, he had returned to the form of a man who could face a battlefield without blinking. "No," he said slowly. "They're watching you and what you're carrying." A jolt shot down my spine. The baby Samuel didn't confirm. He didn't need to. When he escorted me to the elevator, I noticed something unusual. No two guards like the night before. Only one, the driver. The second guard from yesterday was gone. Samuel noticed my stare toward the empty spot. "Where is he?" I asked. "He's not here anymore." I paused mid-step. "You mean—" "Fired, no." He continued walking, prompting me to follow. "Reassigned." "Because of me." He didn't respond, but silence sometimes speaks more loudly than words. The elevator fell into a metallic hush as it descended. I looked over at Samuel, his face carved like stone eyes, sharp as if running through thousands of possibilities at once. "Samuel," I began. I don't want you getting into trouble because of me." A flicker so faint I almost missed it shifted in his expression. "Hannah," he said, voice lower and softer than I'd ever heard it. "The only thing that would get me into trouble is if something happened to you." I turned away immediately, my heartbeat harsh and unsteady. Samuel said nothing else. But his silence felt heavy, not with anger, but with a decision larger than I realized. The black SUV waited for us in the underground garage. Samuel opened the door for me, not as a polite gesture, but as a reflex born from protection. When he got in, the driver started the engine at once. "Destination?" the driver asked. "Not Harrison Tower," Samuel replied. "Delta Point." The driver glanced at him through the mirror. "Are you sure?" "Very sure." I stared at Samuel. "What is Delta Point?" He turned toward me. "A safer place. Safer than the penthouse. Safer than anywhere in this city." The short, clipped answer made every hair on my arm stand on end. We drove through crowded streets, crossed a bridge over the Chicago River. The sky was gray heavy. The city felt muted, as if waiting for something to break. When the car stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse near the edge of town, I stiffened. "This place is safe." I sounded almost offended. Samuel opened the door, turning to me with an unexpectedly gentle look. Not the warehouse. He motioned toward a small steel door beside it. "Follow me." I stepped out looking carefully. The steel door was tucked behind stacks of old shipping containers, easy to miss unless someone knew it was there. Samuel went first, swiping a card through a small reader near the ground. Beep. The door snapped open. Inside wasn't a warehouse, wasn't decay or rust. It was a long white corridor, bright, immaculate, sterile, in a way that felt almost unreal. "What is this?" I whispered. "A Tier 3 secure residence," Samuel said. "I use it only when I need to keep someone completely safe." Who stayed here before Samuel kept walking silent. I followed him, my heart pounding. He waited until I stepped beside him before answering, his voice so quiet it almost dissolved into the sterile air. "My sister." I stopped breathing. Samuel didn't turn around. He spoke as if pulling the words from a wound that still hadn't healed. "She was threatened by the same kind of man who left you pregnant and alone." A small pause. "She died. Because she wasn't protected in time." I pressed my hand to my mouth. I knew he had scars, but I didn't know they were carved this deep. Another door opened, revealing a different space, clean, warm, safer than the penthouse had ever felt. Reinforced walls, bulletproof glass, hidden surveillance so subtle I wouldn't have noticed without knowing. From now on, Samuel said quietly, "You'll stay here." I turned, facing him fully. "Samuel, I don't want to live like I'm imprisoned." "I know." He stepped forward but didn't touch me. "But here no one can reach you. Why are you doing this?" My voice trembled, thin as thread. "You're practically turning your entire world upside down for me." Samuel held my gaze for so long, it felt like the room shrank around us. It looked like he wanted to say something he had never said to anyone. At last, he exhaled a quiet, fragile breath. "Because you remind me of what I lost." I slowly sat on the edge of a chair, hands instinctively covering my stomach. He looked at my hand resting there, and in that instant, he lost the control he always wore like armor. Just for a heartbeat, his eyes softened enough to hurt. "Hannah," he said gently, "I couldn't save my sister." His gaze lifted, locking with mine, unblinking, unguarded. "But I will save you." I exhaled shakily, my whole body trembling. "And what if the danger isn't from Mason?" I whispered. "What if it's from you?" Samuel straightened, eyes deep as the night outside. He moved closer, bending to meet my eye level. His breath brushed lightly across my lips, sending my pulse into chaos. He whispered, "I am dangerous, but never to you." I opened my eyes, staring straight into his. How can I believe that Samuel lowered his voice to something raw, almost confession? "Because if you disappeared from this world..." He paused, darkness swirling in his gaze with a kind of fear no man like him should ever possess. "The rest of me would disappear with you." I couldn't reply. I couldn't breathe. Because in that moment, I understood that the most dangerous thing here wasn't the black car waiting outside. It was Samuel Harrison, and everything I was beginning to feel for him. The silence in Delta Point was not the silence of a home. It was the silence of a fortress. No city noise, no car horns, no unfamiliar footsteps. Only the faint sound of ventilation, like the slow exhale of a giant sleeping beast. And I was inside its belly. Samuel had left the security room early that morning. I sat in the small kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of warm ginger tea, staring at the ceiling. The soft LED lights spread an even glow across the room, yet I still felt as though someone was watching me from behind the walls. Not because I feared this place, but because of the man who brought me here. The security door opened, and Samuel stepped in. He wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing faint veins along his forearms. His hair was slightly damp, maybe from a shower or from splashing water on his face to push back exhaustion. I had never seen him look this human. "Did you sleep?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "Yes," I said softly, then met his eyes. "And you?" Samuel paused. "Just for a second." "Not necessary," he replied. That wasn't an answer. It was an evasion. I wanted to ask why I wanted to know what could keep a man like Samuel Harrison from sleep. But the question stuck in my throat when I noticed a faint dark shadow under his eyes, almost invisible unless you looked closely. I set down my cup. "Samuel, where were you all night?" He sat across from me but didn't touch the food on the table. His fingers rested on the surface, light but tense. "Investigating the car from last night," he said. "There were 3 men inside." My heart slammed against my ribs. 3. Do you know who they are? Samuel lifted his gaze. His eyes were so sharp, the air between us seemed to freeze. They don't belong to any group I know. He paused. His voice dropped heavy as lead. And that Hannah is more dangerous than anything. I leaned back in the chair. My hand settled over my stomach without thinking. They're really watching me. Samuel glanced at my hand, then at my face. In that moment, his eyes returned to the familiar intensity I had grown used to, quiet on the surface but burning beneath. Not just you, he said. What you're carrying. A cold current ran up my spine. You mean, there's a chance Mason owed something? To someone, Samuel said, staring straight into my eyes. And when he ran, he lowered his voice. They followed what he left behind. The baby. I had always thought of it as a part of me, a small life I needed to protect. But the moment Samuel said that, I realized it might also be a target. The room seemed to shrink. You think they want my child? My voice cracked. Samuel stood, moving toward me. He placed a hand on the back of my chair, not touching me, just close enough that his breath brushed my hair. I won't let that happen. Just one sentence, yet its weight felt like a vow forged in steel. Around noon, Samuel left me in the small reading room so he could meet with his team. I sat on the sofa, one hand on my stomach, the other holding a book I couldn't read a single word of. I was forcing myself to breathe when the indicator light on the wall shifted from green to yellow. A small signal, but unmistakable. There was movement outside the perimeter. I shot to my feet. The door opened immediately. Not Samuel. A guard, steel-faced, dressed in black, stepped in. Miss Foster, he said, please follow me. My stomach dropped. Is something wrong? I'm taking you to the impenetrable room. Each word struck my ribs like a blow. Where is Samuel? He's handling the situation. Situation. He didn't need to explain danger. I followed him, my legs shaking, breath unsteady. The hallway stretched long-lit, just enough for me to see ahead. With every step, my shadow dragged behind me like a silent weight. When the guard led me into a large room made of reinforced glass, the door closed behind me with a soft click. Yet it sent a shiver through my bones. There was nothing inside except a long seat, a small table, and a wall-mounted screen showing the perimeter cameras. I stared at the screen. Movement outside the fence. Something vague. A figure. Then two. My fingers dug into each other, nails pressing into my skin. No, this can't be real. 5 minutes later, the door swung open. Samuel stepped inside. I nearly rushed to him, but he lifted a hand slightly, signaling me to stay where I was. He wasn't creating distance because he didn't care. He was creating distance to protect me. Samuel, who are they? What do they want? He walked toward me but stopped one step away. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, slightly rumpled, and on the back of his hand, a faint smear of blood. My chest tightened painfully. You're hurt. It's not mine, he said quietly. A chill crawled down my spine. Samuel, what is happening? He looked at me this time with no mask, no barrier. In his eyes I saw anger, calculation, and something else. Something rare for a man like him, fear. The ones watching you don't belong to any faction. I know, he said slowly, but they know how to avoid the cameras. And that means one thing. What thing? Samuel studied me for a long moment before speaking. They're not here because of Mason. They're here because of you. The room spun for a heartbeat. I shook my head weak. I don't know anyone. I didn't wrong anyone. Why would Samuel move closer, breaking the distance for the first time since entering the room? He placed both hands on my shoulders. Not hard, not forcing, just steadying me. Hannah, he said, voice low enough that his breath brushed my cheek. There's something you don't know. I swallowed. What? Samuel leaned in slightly. Then he whispered, the baby you're carrying isn't just yours. I froze. What does that mean? Samuel's eyes held a truth so heavy it hurt to look at. Hannah, he said softly, Mason didn't work for small-time criminals. My breath trembled. You know who the father is involved with? He'll closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, the depth in his gaze almost broke me. Mason worked for a bloodline monitoring organization, and your child may carry a value you can't begin to imagine. The silence was so absolute I could hear my heartbeat echoing. Samuel continued, voice sinking like weight into my chest. Hannah, your baby isn't just a life, it's a target. The air inside the security room felt frozen. I could hear my heartbeat echoing inside my chest. Stubborn, frantic trembling, yet still clinging to the single rhythm keeping me from collapsing. The baby is a target. My voice sounded like an echo, thin, unsteady, uncertain. Samuel stood across from me, unmoving, not blinking, not hiding the severity of what he had just revealed. He let me face the bare truth, without softening it, without distorting it. Who did Mason work for? I asked, my chest so tight it hurt to breathe. Samuel drew in a slow breath, choosing his words with surgical precision. Not the Mafia. He enunciated each word. They're not tied to any syndicate I know or have ever fought. He stepped closer. Only a few steps remained between us. It's a closed group. No public footprint, no formal name. Only one thing they care about. He lifted a hand and touched my wrist very lightly, just a brush, yet enough to throw my breath off rhythm. A specific genetic sequence. Cold washed through me. What are you talking about? I'm just a normal person. I don't carry anything special. Samuel shook his head. Hannah, not you. His eyes darkened deep enough to swallow the room's light. Mason. I froze. You're saying Mason has some kind of genetic anomaly, yet an illness? Samuel said. A rare variant. Only a small number of people on Earth possess it. And for certain individuals. He paused a beat. It's worth more than a life. My arms wrapped around my belly instinctively. Then, the baby. Samuel looked at me with icy clarity, yet beneath it a wound he never named. It may carry that variant. My head spun. Pieces crashed together in my mind. The way Mason avoided hospitals, the strange phone calls at midnight, his irrational secrecy, and that one line he once joked about. I have something people want, but they'll never get it. Back then, I thought he was bragging. Now I realized he had been warning me without even knowing it. I stepped backward, hands tightening over my stomach, as if I could protect life with sheer instinct. Samuel moved toward me instantly, but stopped when I lifted my hand. Don't, just let me think. He halted, but his eyes never left me, not even for a second. A soft flash lit up the monitor from the motion sensors. Samuel turned, his expression shifting in an instant, focused, cold, predatory. New movement on the east side, a guard reported through the intercom. Samuel pressed the button. Distance under 400 meters. Armed unclear. My legs trembled so hard I had to grip the chair. Samuel turned off the intercom, then faced me again. Hannah, I need you to listen carefully. He stepped forward, placing both hands on the sides of the chair, lowering himself until his eyes were level with mine. In that moment, the entire world seemed to narrow down to just him and me. You cannot leave this place. His tone was low, steady, absolute. I've ordered my people to lock down the perimeter. But if they're the ones I think... Who do you think they are? I whispered, breath uneven. Samuel looked into me so deeply it felt like he was cutting through every layer of defense I had. People who don't fear death. A brief pause. Or me. A wave of cold surged up my spine. Samuel, I whispered, you can't face them alone. He placed his hand on the table close to mine, but not touching. Hannah, I've faced worse. His eyes burned like black fire. But never before. Have I had something to lose? My heart clenched. You won't lose me. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Samuel shut his eyes, a slight movement, but it felt like my words had touched a place in him no one else had reached. When he looked at me again, the intensity in his gaze made my chest tighten. Hannah, he said softly, almost choking on the words. You don't understand. If they touch you, I won't be myself anymore. And I felt it, the truth beneath his voice, the danger in his presence, the tenderness he would never admit. Suddenly, the warning lights on the wall shifted red. A guard's voice shouted through the intercom. Movement approaching from the north basement, Samuel straightened his face, transforming into something I had never seen fully before, the killing instinct of a man carved from darkness. Hannah, come here. I barely had time to react before his hand closed around my wrist. Not harsh, but firm enough to guide me. His hand was warmer than usual, large, steady, holding me like I was something that could shatter from the wrong pressure. He pulled me toward a concealed steel door behind a bookshelf. It opened under his palm print. Go inside. Don't come out until I say so. I shook my head rapidly. No, Samuel. I don't want you going out there alone. He turned, cupping my face with both hands, the first time he'd ever touched me so completely. Hannah, he said, voice low, almost trembling. You are carrying a piece of the future. His thumb brushed my cheek. I'm only the past. Tears erupted before I could stop them. Don't say that. He leaned his forehead against mine. For a moment, I felt his heartbeat fast, frantic, almost as wild as mine. I have to go out there, he whispered. If I don't, they'll break in. Samuel. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, quick, almost painful, like a prayer he would never admit to making. Then he stepped back. Before closing the steel door, he said one last sentence, soft but sharp enough to split my heart open, Hannah. If anything happens to me, trust no one. Not even someone who calls himself Samuel Harrison. The metal door slid shut. I was swallowed by darkness. And outside, gunfire erupted. Gunfire thudded against the thick walls like muffled thunder. It wasn't loud, just thud-thud, but enough to freeze every cell in my body. I pressed both hands over my belly, trying to steady my breathing. But my heart refused to obey. It pounded as if it wanted to escape my chest, panicked, desperate, hollow. Samuel? I whispered. The safe room was small, barely enough for two people to stand shoulder to shoulder. Metal walls. No window. No natural light. A small overhead bulb glowed faintly, dimmed deliberately so it wouldn't draw attention. I sank to the cold floor, knees to my chest, listening to the distant echoes filtering through the steel door. Shouts, metal clashing, something heavy hitting the ground. Then silence. A silence that felt like a rope tightening around my throat. Suddenly, a thump struck the steel door so close I jerked upright. I held my breath. Cold drained from my limbs. A man's voice spoke very near. Hannah. My heart stopped. It wasn't Samuel. It was the voice of someone I had never met. Deeper, rougher, with a command hidden beneath the words. Terrified, I backed against the wall, arms wrapped protectively around my stomach, eyes locked on the door. Hannah Foster, the voice repeated clearer. I know you're in there. My throat closed. Samuel isn't coming back. Open the door. I shook violently. My breath broke in fragments. Not coming back. The words sliced through me like a blade. I'm not opening it. I forced out, though the tremor in my voice betrayed me. The man chuckled softly, a sound devoid of humor. You're braver than I thought. But Hannah, you don't understand who Samuel Harrison truly is. I bit my lip until it bled. He's not the man you think, the stranger continued, his tone curling like a whisper against my ear through the wall. What did he tell you? That he'd protect you? That you'd be safe as long as you stayed close to him? I shut my eyes. I'm not opening the door. I repeated, even though my hands were trembling uncontrollably. The man sighed. You think he's different from us. Samuel is not like you. Oh, he's far worse, the man said softly, almost amused. He only kills when necessary. But when it's necessary, he never hesitates. A cold shudder raced down my spine. Hannah, he said, do you know why he's hiding you? I stayed silent, too afraid to answer, too afraid to deny, too afraid to admit the fear tightening in my throat. Because he doesn't want anyone to know you're carrying Mason's child, does he? My hand flew to my stomach. That child, he continued, is valuable to us. But to him, his voice turned sharp as a blade. To him, it's nothing but an excuse to keep you. I shook my head, tears burning. He's not like that. You think he cares for you? He gave a low, mocking laugh. Samuel Harrison doesn't know how to love anyone except the darkness that raised him. I said, I'm not opening the door. Footsteps retreated. Then the clang of metal like someone setting down tools. Fine, the man said coldly. You've chosen the wrong side. His footsteps faded away. I slid down the wall, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I wanted to believe he was lying. I wanted to believe Samuel hadn't hidden anything more from me. But I had seen too many secrets in his eyes, too many shadows, too many unspoken wounds. And the last words he said before he left trust. No one, not even Samuel Harrison, pulled me deeper into an unseen abyss. I forced myself to stand, pressing my ear to the door. Silence. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I pounded on the steel. Samuel. Samuel, do you hear me? Silence. I hit harder, tears spilling. Answer me. I know you're out there. But no sound came back. The silence stretched long, suffocating. I slid to the floor and cried for fear, for anger, for pain, for not knowing who to trust anymore. I wiped my eyes and pressed a hand to my belly. Mom's here. I'm here, I whispered. My hand had barely lifted when crash. I jolted backward. Not gunfire, not voices, a violent impact on the vault door. A familiar voice came through the metal, breathless and strained. Hannah. My heart exploded in my chest. Samuel. Step back. His voice was rough, urgent, but alive. I'm breaking the door. I pressed myself against the far wall, shielding my stomach. Seconds later, thud. The door shook violently. Hannah. Samuel shouted, panic ripping through his tone. Panic I had never heard from him. Talk to me. I'm here. At once, the pounding intensified. A second blow, a third. On the fourth, the door burst open. Metal screeched and scattered. Samuel lunged inside. His sleeve was torn, blood streaked down his arm and neck. His breathing was ragged, eyes burning red with adrenaline. But when he saw me, his entire body froze. Hannah. He exhaled shakily, like life had just returned to him. I couldn't hold back. I ran into his arms. He wrapped me so tightly it felt like he feared I might disappear. His chest pressed against mine, breath trembling against my hair. I heard him mutter, voice breaking. You're alive. You're alive. I gripped his shirt, shaking. You're hurt. He shook his head, burying his face in my hair. It doesn't matter. I just needed to know you were safe. His breath shuddered, not from pain, from fear. I had never seen him like this. He loosened his hold slightly, lifting my face with both hands, studying every inch of me as if making sure I was real. He inhaled deeply, voice low. Hannah, there's something I need to tell you. My eyes were still wet. Samuel touched my cheek, his gaze heavy with emotion. They want the baby. He swallowed hard, not just because of the genetic variant. I froze. They want it for another reason. What reason? Samuel's hands tightened gently, but with the weight of truth he could no longer hide. Hannah? He locked his eyes with mine. Because Mason wasn't just someone who carried the variant. He was the heir to a bloodline believed to be extinct. I stared at him, breath trapped in my throat. What bloodline? Samuel answered with a voice dark and heavy as a verdict. A bloodline belonging to a family whose underground power surpasses even the Mafia. I stood there feeling as if the world had been split open, a single deep cut running straight through my heart. Samuel, still breathing hard from the fight, held my shoulders firmly. Beyond the broken steel door, the hallway still smelled of gunpowder, but he looked at me as if the chaos outside no longer mattered, as if I was the only thing anchoring him to the present. Hannah, he said, voice low and heavy like a confession drawn from the deepest part of him, Mason's family. They were never ordinary. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. What do you know about them? Samuel exhaled a long breath, one that seemed to carry the weight of every shadow he had lived under. They are the remnants of the Devereaux bloodline, he said. A family believed to be wiped out nearly 30 years ago. A family that recognized no law, no morality, only power carved in blood. A violent shiver rushed through me. And Mason, he was their last descendant. Yes, Samuel's gaze dropped to my belly, heavy with unspoken emotion. And your baby is the only heir they have left. My stomach tightened. An instinctive primal fear rose in me, strong enough to make my knees weak. I stepped back. Samuel instantly caught me, steadying my body with both hands. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. "I'm here." I looked up at him, tears sliding down my face before I even noticed. "And you, what are you to them?" Samuel was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke the sentence that punched the air from my lungs. "I used to hunt them." My breath stuttered. The world around me seemed to tilt. You hurt them. I fought them," Samuel said. "And they killed my sister." I froze. My heart felt like it dropped straight out of my chest. "Samuel." He shut his eyes, jaw tensing with a pain so old yet so sharp. The Devereaux hunted women they believed carried worthy blood to rebuild their line. My sister fell into their hands. They took her baby before it even reached a week old. I covered my mouth with my hand, horrified. "I didn't get there in time," he said, his voice cracking in a way I had never heard. "And from that day, I swore I would wipe out whoever remained." Samuel lifted his eyes, dark and tense, and fractured by old grief. "Hannah, now they know you're carrying the heir they've been searching for." I couldn't breathe. A cold wind, imagined or real, seemed to slither down my spine. And then the question I dreaded slipped out of me without permission. "I'm just a target in the war between you and them." Samuel froze. His shoulders flinched as if I had stabbed him. "Hannah, don't say that." "Then tell me," I said, lifting my chin despite the tears. "What am I to you?" No footsteps echoed in the hallway. No gunfire remained. Only my heartbeat pounding with fear and hope. Samuel lowered his hands, then lifted them again slowly until they cupped my face. His hands trembled. "Hannah." His voice was rough, stripped raw, as if he were dragging the words straight from somewhere he had never dared enter. "I didn't come to you because of the baby." My breath caught. "I didn't bring you to the penthouse out of obligation." His thumb brushed the corner of my eye where a tear was lingering. "And I didn't take you to Delta Point because of duty." I swallowed hard, fighting not to cry again. "I did all of it because—" He inhaled sharply, desperation tightening his voice. "I love you, Hannah." The words fell like glass, shattering, painful, beautiful, and freeing all at once. My fingers curled into his collar, pulling him closer. "Samuel." My voice broke, but it carried the truth he needed. "I trust you." His eyes opened dark and deep, and for the first time I saw something I had never seen in him before. Hope. He drew me into his arms. Not urgently, not fiercely, but with a deep, steady hold, the kind of embrace that felt like a man clutching a piece of his soul he thought he would never find. I rested my forehead against his chest, listening to the heavy, uneven rhythm of his heart. Not the heartbeat of a dangerous man, but of someone terrified of losing me more than losing his own life. When the last remaining Devereaux members were eliminated by the force Samuel had summoned people he trusted with his life, I stood beside him watching the sunrise spill through the cracks of the steel door. He held my hand tightly. "From today on," he said gently, weaving his fingers with mine, "no one can touch you. Or the baby." "And you?" I asked softly, turning to look at him. He smiled faintly, a rare, fragile smile I had never seen on him before. "I'll be here," he said, "for as long as you want me." I leaned my head on his shoulder, my hand instinctively protecting my belly. "Our child won't grow up in fear." Samuel bent down and pressed a kiss to my hair. "No," he whispered. "They'll grow up in love." I lifted my face, touching his cheek. "And Samuel, you deserve that too." He closed his eyes, turning his face into my palm like a man tasting peace for the first time in his life. The morning light poured into the room, washing away the darkness. A new chapter began. Not running, not hiding, but a family born from mistakes fear survival. and a love strong enough to defy destiny. I turned to Samuel. Promise me one thing. Anything. Don't disappear. He squeezed my hand firm and warm. I'm not going anywhere, he said. From now on, I'm home. Outside, the sky brightened, chasing away the last shadow of night. I rested my head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat align with mine. And I knew the small mistake that once threw me into the darkness had now led me into a dawn I never dared to dream of. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel and share your thoughts below. Every comment is a spark that helps future stories come alive and reach more hearts.